Okay, so what they want is the value of sine, cosine, and tangent. So I noticed that both of these are even, so I'm going to divide by 2. I'll do this in blue like I used to do. Divide by 2, that means that's 12, that's 13. Well, that reminds me of the special triangle of 5, 12, 13. So if that's 5, that means if it's times 2, that side is 10. You need to make sure you show me that you know that. Now, sine of theta equals, cosine of theta equals, and tan of theta equals. So when I'm talking about theta, I'm looking here. If it's helpful, you can write opposite, adjacent, which means next to, and hypotenuse. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tan is opposite over adjacent. And the nice thing about doing the blue is I don't have to simplify anything because I already simplified in the beginning. All right, I need to put 1056 in standard position, but the problem is that it's too small. So I'm going to go 1056, and some of you could subtract 360, some of you might just subtract 720, which is 360 twice, but I'll just baby step it. 696 minus 360 is 336 degrees. So that's what they want. I want to know in standard position. So in standard position, that's this all the way around, 336 degrees. Check. Reference angle. To find the reference angle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference that 360. So I'm going to go 360 minus 336, which is 24 degrees. That is my reference angle. Now, to get my coterminal is just the negative of this, which happens to also be the 24 degrees. So I'll just show it. You're going 336 minus 360, which is negative 24. Let me just double check. I'm pretty sure I'm right, but okay. Is negative 24 degrees. So there's my coterminal. Okay? Make sure you label. Find the measure of the reference angle. Okay, in order to find the measure of the reference angle, because this is greater than 360, I've got to subtract 360, and I get 210. All right, 210 degrees is in this quadrant, because there's 180, and there's 210. To find the reference angle, I subtract the 2. So I'm going to go 210 minus 180, 30 degrees. That is my reference angle. Okay. They just want the value of x, but what's funny is there's no x, so I'll just find all the angles and all the sides. When I see this shows me they are equivalent. Well, if that's 90 degrees, that means this needs to be 45 degrees, and this needs to be 45 degrees. Which reminds me is that it's a 1, 1, rad 2. Well, what's nice is the ratio isn't that difficult because it's right there. So times 6 rad 2. So C is 6 rad 2. And then I'm going to go times 6 rad 2. Rad 2 times rad 2 is 2 times 6 is 12. Okay? All right, this is one that's going to take a solid minute. I've got to use the 6 trig functions, and I've got to do the point negative 3, 9. So I'm going to go left 3, up 9, and then I'm going to do the Pythagorean theorem. But I notice that 9 and 3 are both divisible by 3, so I'm going to make my life easier. And that's really negative 1, and that's really 3. So that when I go negative 1 squared plus 3 squared equals c squared, I end up getting 10 equals c squared, rad 10. So rad 10 is really what my blue is, which means this is 3 rad 10, because it's 3 times the amount. But honestly, I'm going to look at what the blue is so that it's easier for me. So let's do sine of theta equals cosine of theta equals tan of theta equals. Okay, so theta is this right here. So that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. And 3 over rad 10 is 3 rad 10 over 10. If you want to skip this work and go straight to the answer, I'm definitely fine with that. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, rad 10 is negative rad 10 over 10. And this is opposite over adjacent, so it's just negative 3. All right, so now I have to do the sixth one. So the inverse, or the reciprocal of sine, is cosecant. The reciprocal of cosine is secant. The reciprocal of tan is cotan. I feel like this one's the easiest for me, negative 1/3. I just flip it. Now, it would be annoying to flip this answer, so I'm going to go back to the problem. If I flip 3 over rad 10, it's rad 10 over 3. And if I flip negative 1 over rad 10, it's just negative rad 10. So those are my 6 trig functions. Now I have to find the value of theta. Okay? So I'm going to pick inverse sine because I feel like it. So I'm going to do the inverse sine, and I'm going to do the original 3 over rad 10. You could do 3 rad 10 over 10. And let's see what it gives me. So I'm going to do the inverse sine of 3 divided by rad 10. And it tells me, oopsies, am I in the wrong mode? Hold on. Second reset. Yes. Okay. Let's try this again. Inverse sine of 3 divided by square root of 10. 71.56. Oh, okay, then that turns out that it's fine. Okay, that one was kind of a mean one for sure. Now the problem is that 71.56 tells me, and I'll put this over here, that I'm in the first quadrant. But I'm not actually in the first quadrant. I'm actually in the second quadrant. So what this tells me is the reference angle, which is 71.56 degrees, or 57, rounded to the nearest hundredth. Okay, so let's just make sure you see that. So what that means is that this is really 71.57. Let me zoom that in a little bit. So in order to figure it out, I'm going to reference my reference angle, and I'm going to go 180 minus that. So I go 180 minus 71.57, and I get 108.43 degrees. That's the value of my theta. Okay? Now I want you to be clear. I need you to round it to the nearest hundredth. I need you to show me that it's a degree. I need you to show me that it's theta. I want to show you how you could have done it if it was inverse cosine, just because I want you to see it's not the only option. So I could do then the inverse cosine of negative 1 over rad 10. And it gave me 0.99. What happened here? Okay. Inverse cosine. I think I didn't do inverse cosine. Of negative 1 divided by rad 10. And I get 108. Well, if you look at 108, 108 is right here. Oops, and that's my answer. So if you look, if I would have picked inverse cosine, I would have been done. But I decided to pick inverse sine. So maybe what you do is you go, hey, inverse sine, it didn't tell me the right quadrant. Inverse cosine, and then find it until it tells you the right quadrant, and then you don't have to do this extra work that I did. Okay? All right. They want you to convert it from angle to degrees or degrees to radian. That's in degrees divided by 180. So I'm going to go 155 divided by 180. And then I go second PRB, and I get 31 over 36. So 31 pi over 36. Okay. If I want to change it to degrees, pi equals 180. So I can go 3 times 180 over 10, or that goes in 18, 54 degrees. Okay. Let's look at the next one. So what I want is a coterminal that's positive and negative. Okay, so let's find the positive first, which is the coterminal. And so I'm going to go 360, so that's 110 degrees. That is a positive coterminal. But they also wanted a negative that is equivalent. So if I subtract another 360, that gives me a negative value as well. Okay? Because all that it's telling me is that if I go negative 250 degrees and I go around again, I can still end up in the same spot, and that's negative 610. So be careful of that, because that's what I'm going to be asking you on the test. All right, last two on the bottom. Use the unit circle to find the exact value. Okay, problem is this is in radian, so I'm going to go 180. 180 divided by 4 is negative 45. Well, negative 45 degrees means that that's the reference angle, which actually helped me out a lot because I don't need to know the coterminal. So let me rewrite that, because now I know it's a 45, 90. So 1, negative 1, rad 2. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So that's 1 over rad 2, rad 2, rad 2 is rad 2 over 2. Now, let's say you're not sure if that's the right answer. Since that was cosine, I can do the inverse cosine. So I'll go inverse cosine of rad 2 divided by 2. And it gives me 45 degrees. Well, if you look, that isn't the exact measure, but it is the reference angle. Okay? So I just want you to see. And also, remember, when you're dealing with cosine, it's adjacent. So there could be two possibilities, which would still lend itself to 1 over rad 2. Let's go to the next one, tan of 150. So I'm over here. If this is 150 and this is 180, I complete it. That means the difference between 180 minus 150 is 30 degrees. What's across from the 30? 1. That means this is 60, rad 3. But when I go left, it's negative, and there's a 2. Tan is opposite over adjacent. So 1 over negative rad 3, rad 3, rad 3 is negative rad 3 over 3. Now, if you're not sure if that's right, do the inverse tan. So I'm going to do the inverse tan of negative rad 3, parenthesis, divided by 3. And it gave me negative 30. Now some of you go, that doesn't seem right. But if you look, tan is opposite. So if this was a match, let me just show you. Opposite, negative, over adjacent, positive. And that lends itself to the next problem. Remember, you could have two possibilities to show that it's right. Okay?